Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Hassler with Nutricost, and we've got Phil Cowley here with Phil's My Pharmacist on Instagram and TikTok. Phil, it is so good to have you here.
It's awesome to be here because, I don't have to be in the pharmacy. So you just made my life better.
Any chance to get out. Well, before we dive into like the health and wellness and fitness stuff, just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe some things that you're passionate about.
I started out living like it's like deja vu because every time I come back to Utah County, it reminds me why I wanted to get into healthcare. Because in the late 80s, Pleasant Grove was pretty poor. Like we were pretty poor there. And I remember
Mud hole, right?
It was a mud hole. We lived in a place called, it was Monkey Town. Monkey Town. We called it Monkey Town, our part. And it was all, HUD housing from the 1980s.
Wow.
You remember that? How there was there was white and blue and yellow. They all had the same floor plan. And I remember thinking I didn't want to be in a job that like the construction cycle where you could be doing well and then drop off and being doing well. So I was going to go to college. And so like from a very young age, I decided I wanted a secure job. I was going to go into healthcare to make that secure job. And in the meantime, I had 4 kids, and nothing messes up your plans faster than marriage and kids.
Absolutely. So you have 4 kids then?
4 boys, yeah.
Okay.
My oldest, Jonas, he's 23 this week, and he's got some cerebral scarring. And so that's like totally adjusted my life in every way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I've got 3 other boys. Eli's just barely going into college. He's at USU. And then I've got my youngest, Finn. He's just started high school. And then Zeke, he's in between. So we're right there where we're too old to be young and too young to be old. I don't have any grandkids, so I really don't know what to do with the next step of my life. So that's where we're sitting.
Well, that's exciting. And you're in good company. I have an Eli and I have a Zeke.
See, there we
which
go.
are 2 really kind of rare names, I think. I don't know.
Well, if you're outside of Utah, I think.
Yeah, inside of Utah, there's definitely more of them. So I understand that you're also an avid hiker.
Yeah, I love hiking. So actually, 2 days ago, we just did White Pine. I'm kind of a run hiker. People always ask, what's your best day you've ever had? And I'm supposed to say when I got married or
When my kid was born.
right? So about 3 years ago, I had a buddy said, hey, do you want to go hike the Grand Canyon? And like the whole trip fell apart. Like I was supposed to have it all lined up and it just fell apart. And in the end, I'm like, I'm just going to go. And so he was going to go from the north side to the south side. And I'm like, well, I can't figure out a ride or nothing else. I'm just going to go down as far as I can and then back up. And my legs worked. I don't know if you're a runner.
Yeah.
Like every now and then when you get old, your legs go. And so I ran from the north rim to the south rim, back to the north rim. And we did it in it was like 14, 15 hours. Like my legs just went. And I was sitting all by myself about 3 a.m. on the second Black Bridge. And I thought to myself, life can't get better than this. There's not a soul around. My cell phone doesn't work. It was the most epic day. I love hiking. Like I can go hiking any day of the week. And I think it's just, there's a clarity and there's a chance to take stock of what you've done right and wrong in your life and what matters and what doesn't matter. And for me, it takes a long time. So I have to get myself into that burn mode to where everything hurts before I finally start letting go of things that don't matter.
Right. There's this great quote. It's we don't go to the wilderness to rough it, but to smooth it. And that just resonates with me. That's my happy place too.
Yeah, it does hurt to take off all those edges along the way, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's funny. So I'm a nutrition coach and a personal trainer. When people ask me what's the most effective exercise, I say, well, it's the one that you're going to do. That's the most effective.
See, I have a different answer.
What's yours?
I always say, which one do you hate the most? Whatever you hate to do the most. So like if somebody says, the one I hate the most is pull-ups. I'm like, well, then obviously a pull-up is going to be the most effective. But I do agree, it has to be that you'll still do it. Because the more you hate it, the more you should be probably doing it.
Right. That's probably true. But so my example for that, not pull-ups, is swimming. Like I don't hate swimming, but I'm not going to do it for fun. Like never in my life.
Are you a sinker?
No, I think I'm a decent swimmer.
Are you? Some people just always
sink
sink when they get in the water. So you can watch them and they're like dragging, no matter what they do, they're just so heavy they sink.
No, I do all right, but it's just, I don't know. There's 1,000 other things I would do before I would go swimming. And swimming's a great workout if you do it, but I'm not going to do it. But pound for pound, I'd say hiking, because you can do it at any level. You can do it as a beginner. You can run, hike, right?
Right.
The fact that anybody can do it and it burns a ton of calories and you get to be in nature, like for me, pound for pound.
The wind blowing, standing next to a creek, little bit of shade, that's a good day.
Absolutely.
Like that picture is always a good day. Put me on a road, blistery hot, running down that thing. I don't know. I think somebody else can have that.
Right. Well, what would be something that when people find out about you, it surprises them?
That's a great question. If somebody finds, okay, so when I was growing up, I was the mascot in the high school. Okay. So that all was it. I was
Viking, right?
The Viking, yeah. So I was, and I don't think that would surprise anybody. I think what surprises people more is that the person that was the Viking, the class clown that was always playing. Like I decided to go into a job that most people see as like everybody's introverted inside the field of pharmacy, like 100%, which worked out really
Just
good
like
for me.
You, right?
Yeah, exactly. It works out so good for me because like it's like the last niche available in social media because they all just didn't want to be seen.
Right.
So I think it surprised more people that I went into pharmacy of all things instead of something that would fit the personality that I have more.
Right.
Because the pre-pharmacy Phil was, always having fun. Like I have this policy that I say yes. So if somebody calls up and said, "Do you want to?" Before they can finish, I'm like, I'll say yes because life's about having that adventure. And every time I've said no, I've always wondered what I missed out on. When I say yes, I usually come back better. So when I went in and I basically started pharmacy, I got real quiet. I tried to stay out of the limelight. I found that in the pharmacy world, the more limelight you have on you, because you have so many bosses, FDA, DEA, the Department of Licensing, like they're all encompassing so I got really quiet. And I think more people kind of are curious about why I ended up in that direction that I don't think they would have assumed.
Right.
But then if you see the videos and things I do now, it all kind of work together in the long run. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, you talked about your dad had worked construction, right?
Yeah, Lowry Doors here in Orem. He worked construction. In fact, I did a lot of garage door stuff. I'm good at it. I just don't tell the neighbors because I don't want to go fix their doors, but I'm good at it.
And so you decided you didn't want to do that because of the cyclical type, and there are a few other things that pushed you into the health and wellness field.
After my LDS mission, so I was in Korea, and you always go through this panic mode when you're getting ready to come back, and your head's kind of a mess because you're like, okay, now I got to be in real life. I got to have my whole career set out. You're ready to go. So I remember writing a letter home saying, well, if I wanted to take over the business, could I? And my dad and his partner said, yes, you can. We'll wait till you get back to see what you want. I got back and I looked at it, and I've always had this underlying part of me that thinks that there's something that I can do to impact the world. Like it's this weird thing. In some ways, it just kind of sits in my belly thinking, what can you do that would really, really change the world?
Yeah.
And so I had that, and I thought to myself, in the construction field, there are lots of stuff. You can do all those things, but it just didn't feel quite right. And then I watched my dad, and, they'd have their good years, and their good years are so good. And then their bad years are so bad. And I wanted something a little more stable for my family, wanted to go to college. Originally, I said I was going to be a doctor because it plays well with the ladies. Mm-hmm. It was really great.
I get that.
Yeah. And then I kind of got talked out of being a doctor from a couple of doctors' wives, of all people. They said, well, do you like your wife? Because if you want to be a doctor, she's going to have to not see you for a long time.
Right.
So we did that. So I'm hanging garage doors when I'm hearing this, when I'm going to UVU at the time, because I kind of did the whole tour of all the colleges except for BYU. I didn't. Apologies to anybody, but that's the only one I almost didn't go to. But when we went to a couple of them, one of the ladies came out of her house. It was a blue house. I'm in there fixing her garage door. She actually had like 3 black widows in there. So, but I didn't tell her that part. But I was fixing it, and she came out, which was really weird. And she asked what my plans were, and I told her I was going to go in to be a doctor. And she said, "Does your wife want you to be a doctor?" I'm like, well, I didn't ask her, really. And she goes, because I don't want my husband to be one anymore, and he is one. And then she was talking to me. I think it's because the kids were screaming inside.
Right.
She wasn't real eager to go back inside. But she talked to me for a long time, and she explained that there are jobs where you give up too much family time. And I had found that I was really good at chemistry, which I didn't know. I actually wasn't really good at anything in high school because it was mostly about having fun.
Right.
But I found out chemistry. And so we started looking at pharmacy at that point, and that's how we started moving towards the whole pharmacy thing, was on the idea that I would have more time with my family. And that didn't work out because I started my own store. And so when I started my own store, it's been open now 23 years. I averaged about 53 hours a week, give or take. And I've been on call from all the nursing homes and that for that same period of time. So I go out of the house about 2-3 times a week. So I didn't get to see my kids a lot. And I still had that underpinning of, you could do more. And then I got really caught up in church and was in young men's forever. And then I had little kids. And there was always part of me that was like, okay, there has to be more to this because the money wasn't satisfying to me. The success of the pharmacy was only satisfying when I was talking to people. Like I didn't really care how big the pharmacy got. I never really wanted more of them. And so all of that kind of came to a head in about 2019 when the pharmacy started doing worse.
Yeah. Which is a great segue. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's kind of a pharmacy crisis, right? I was looking over the one of your posts. You'd mentioned 1 in 8 pharmacies has closed.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, give us an overview of the cause and what that means.
If you wanted to go get a dirty Diet Coke right now, you're going to spend about $6 for it, $5-6 for it, right?
Yep.
Your heart medication, your pharmacy, to take the pills, to buy the pills, to put the pills in the bottle, to put a label on the bottle, to pay the employees, and to sell it to you, probably getting about $3.30. So your heart pills that can kill you cost more than your dirty Diet Coke does right now. The average reimbursement above cost has gone down to about a third of what it was 20 years ago, but the number of prescriptions you have to do has tripled. So where you used to do 100 prescriptions, you have to do 300 to try to make the same money, but now you're paying more employees. That pressure originally was applied to independent pharmacies, but now it's moved to chain stores. So from about 9 months ago until the next 9 months, between all of the chain stores and the independent pharmacies, they're expecting about 1 in 8 to close their doors.
Wow.
And so you'll see it. You'll see mostly what you're seeing right now is Walgreens and CVS, some Walmarts. You're seeing independents one at a time closing off, which is just creating more problems because that doesn't mean the other guys now have more business. I looked at my claims last night. In my pharmacy, we're sitting right close to 7,000 claims for this month. The first 800 were claims that I lost money filling. So if I wouldn't have filled them, I didn't make a dime. Some of them I'd lost up to $160 by filling a claim where you're getting reimbursed so poorly.
Yeah.
So the crisis is real, and it'll get worse, and there's actually no answer for it right now.
What is causing the crisis? Is this the medication shortage? Is it government meddling? Like what would be the big maybe 2 or 3 things that maybe are causing it?
So it's a race to the bottom right now. So prescription drugs cost more. We spend more than any other country. We actually spend almost 3 times as much as any other country in the world. So everybody's thinking, well, why would pharmacies go under? We're giving you more money. The first thing you have to understand is the top 1% of the drugs, maybe 1.5, we spend more money on those drugs, that 1%, than we do the bottom 50%.
Yeah.
So you've got a few drugs that cost hundreds of $1,000s a month, whereas the average one that someone takes, the generic drug, doesn't fit in that. And so in order to help cost containment, our government and also all the corporations, they did something really smart. They decided to squeeze pennies out of pennies rather than dollars out of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So the prices on the top end keep going up and up and up. So last year we spent more money on Ozempic than we did every generic drug bought in the United States.
Yeah.
Every single one. So
Wow.
if you would have gone to Ozempic and said the United States is only going to pay half, well, Ozempic would have said, okay, because who else are they going to sell it to?
Right.
And then you could have doubled the price of the generic drugs, which then would have given enough margin there
Right.
for pharmacies to survive. And if you look in your cupboard, you don't have the drugs that they're talking about that are expensive.
Of course.
And it would be so much easier to look at those. That's number one. Number two, the people in the middle, they're called PBMs. They do what middlemen always do, and they're there to make money, and they're super good at it. In fact, they've bought billion-dollar healthcare systems like Cigna are now bought by the PBMs in the middle.
Awesome.
And they keep showing that they're not making enough money by spending it, but PBMs make $4 to $7 a prescription every single time, even when your pharmacy doesn't. So there's lots of prescriptions where I make 32 cents and they make $4.
So as a complete layman who doesn't know, what purpose does a PBM actually serve? Like they have to, when we talk about value add, right? Like what is the value that they add other than making that $4 to $7?
Because there's always 1 or 2 bad players.
Right.
My dad used to say, you lock your front door for the honest people, not the dishonest.
Right.
So the PBMs are in place because they were seeing an inflation of cost in the late 80s. And they thought the PBMs could help control prescription costs. So they brought in an outside organization to try to make sure it's mediated rather than mediate by itself. So the concept of a PBM to keep those few bad players in check was a great idea. What it turned out to be is go look at the value and how much money they're making. They just kind of got away from them.
Yeah.
And the PBMs, I'm going to say this. Anybody who is voting for a candidate, you should see how much money that PBM is getting them, and you should question your candidate why they're taking money from a corporation like that.
Right.
Because that should be something that triggers in your head. There's a few organizations you're like, okay, I don't really want my candidate taking money from that. They fund a lot of things and they have a lot of money, and it makes me really nervous because that's a way for them to keep their pockets really shiny.
Yeah.
So the PBMs had a place. They just overstretched and they need to be brought back in. The worst thing is nobody knows.
Right. Yeah.
There's no clarity.
Until I started watching stuff with you in it, I had no idea what a PBM was.
So boring, right?
Well,
I mean, it's so
it's
boring.
great when you talk about it. Like,
well, that's the problem is every pharmacist wants to talk about, like, I get calls from all the time, talk more about PBMs. I'm like, I will put them to sleep. They don't care. Like, the only way you could do this is if I like dressed everybody up like Hamburglar and then have them stealing from Grimace and then maybe they'll watch for a minute because they don't care. But if you do have prescriptions, you should care because that name on the back of your card is the reason why your prescriptions aren't in check. Their whole job was to make it cheap. And every year that they've been involved, prices have gone up. Yeah. And they have no clarity. So nobody knows what they're doing with any of the money. And they say that they can't find the data. It's too hard to get. So Congress keeps telling them to wait. So I just want you to know, when I hear PBMs, think of the Hamburglar stealing from Grimace, and then it won't be so boring.
I think you're absolutely right. It has to come back to how does this affect me, right? Because everybody, they love you, right?
Right.
but people are with, I was looking at your followers and the people that I have in common, and they're all parents, right? And like most parents are like,
right.
Well, how am I going to take care of my family? Right?
Or how are you going to afford it? Look at the price of drugs now.
Right.
What do you don't think we're going to retire, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, the baby boomers might get away with retiring. That's a big might, but we're not going to. In the meantime, we're seeing. And I'm not a big fan of socialized medicine because socialized medicine pushes what we're seeing,
right?
Which is a lack of clarity. What I am a huge fan of is clarity. You should be able to go to whoever you pay money to and say, where's that money going? Anytime you have a black hole, you should be worried because social media has helped me. My business was doing fine. I'm telling you, I don't think I can retire, especially with my oldest boy. And what I look at is healthcare. There are more people who go bankrupt because of healthcare than anything else. And we are sicker now than we've ever been. So. Right. If I was hiring somebody to make me feel better and I was paying more than anybody else and I was feeling worse, I would fire them.
Absolutely. So how do we do that, right? So when we talk about this and this crisis, you said that there's no solution. What would a solution look like to you?
Actually, I do. I always say no solution because it's so dramatic. Didn't you like the drama?
It's so dramatic. But the way things are going, there's no solution, right? If we just leave things the way they are, they're not going to get fixed. So what would your solution be?
The thing about equilibrium in every ecosystem is when things get bad enough, we get huge changes. And at some point, there is a senator or there is a representative who's going to come out as the great mighty hero when it comes to healthcare. It's happening. If I had a suggestion, my suggestion would be for complete clarity, and I would say start posting everything to where everybody can look at it. I'm paying this PBM. You have to be careful which ones you say. I'm a little worried about car bombs, so I don't name them by name. But if right now I would say clarity and honesty will bring enough of it forward. Think of all the other times that when the truth really came out of where the money went. So your employer... right now, they're giving a PBM $700 a month just for you and your family. And then they come back and say, well, it costs too much. Well, if the clarity came out that of that $700, that they did buy $700 worth of drugs, but then they got a kickback from the drug company for $300 and they didn't tell you anything about it. As soon as that happens, and we demand clarity where that money went to, like we would with any other government contract,
right?
I think that people are smart. I think that it would clean itself up pretty quick. It's all about clarity.
So that takes an act of Congress then, right?
Yeah, but Congress, I mean, this is a whole way that somebody can get elected.
Right.
Like this is a big enough problem now.
Yeah.
That if somebody can come out and say that I really will take out, and they always say big pharma, but big pharma's in bed with the PBMs.
Right.
Those two play with each other all the time. They're always together.
Right.
They make plans, and then they don't invite you to the mall. They get tickets to Taylor Swift, and you don't get to go because they say we're not going to go, and then you see the pictures on Instagram. But those two play together all the time. And what they do is they price set, and then the PBM says, well, I don't want to pay that much. Like, let's price set it that high. Then we can tell the government it's worth $1,000. But then on the back end, I'll give you $300. So you're only paying $700. And so this game goes on, but there's no clarity in when there was a gag rule for pharmacists that I couldn't tell you it was cheaper not to use your insurance in the state of Utah, like until 4 years ago. They would take my contracts away if I said this with your insurance, just say don't use the insurance, it was cheaper. I couldn't even say that without losing my contract until 4 years ago.
Well, and what a great move by big PBM that nobody knows who they are. Like everybody villainizes Big Pharma. Right. Nobody...
Right. And they've done it to a point. So like pharmacists can't individually sue them either. So we can individually do it, but we can't take as a whole group saying you're not. So they underpay pharmacists.
Right. You're not doing what you're here to do.
Right. And you're not doing it. So I'm going to sue you because you said you would give me a contract rate. I can't get a whole group of pharmacists that would have a chance to fight against them. In order to become contracted with them, you can't sign a class action suit against them. Which is insane to me because like that hurts every person in the state of Utah. It hurts. Just ask somebody who spends a lot of money on their prescriptions. Yeah. It'll take you like 3 doors and then start to realize that 50% of that is being sucked up in the middle.
Yeah.
And then it'll become, PBMs won't be that boring word the day that you see that your husband's on a $24,000 medication.
Yeah.
And you're stuck in the middle and you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. But you're also afraid of the government to a point to like, well, I don't have a solution. The solution's easy. Clarity. If something costs $24,000, you want to see
why and
all the way through. If I was going to buy a car, I would be able to do my research online. I would know what it's cost. I know what it costs in someplace else. I would get the best price. With drugs, you just do what your insurance company tells you and you don't know where any of the money is.
Yeah. And then if you're upset with it, you blame the pharmacist, right?
Every time.
Every time.
And we just take it. We take it on the nose. Every time somebody doesn't get their prescription, you're trying to explain it to them, but we're never I own my store, but I have like 12 bosses. Right. And like, you should see like when the auditors come from like the PBMs or when like the state comes in, it's like a full on like SWAT task force. They're kicking down the door. They're running right back. They go right to this place. Like they're all ready to catch you. And you're like, we're the most boring people in the world. I'm just doing my job. It's a pharmacy, man. Like it's not prescription. Right. It's crazy how aggressive they get. I was probably smart for staying out of the limelight for so long. I've definitely got a target on my back now.
Yeah. Well, with great power, right, comes great responsibility.
Well, if you want your kids to be brave, you have to be brave.
Absolutely. I love that.
Like that's where we're at here. I want my kids to be brave, and I don't like just be brave and it'll work out. So now I have to do it. I wish I would have said something else, like just be rich and it'll all work out. But
here you are having to do what you said.
All this work.
As I've followed you on social media, I noticed that a lot of the people that we have in overlap are middle-aged women with kids. As you're generating content, and this is shifting gears a little bit, do you find that these people are here mostly because they're trying to take care of their family, or they're looking how to like improve themselves?
Well, I think you see that underlying disappointment with what's happened inside of medical system.
Right.
So for years you got told, just do what the doctor said and it's going to work out. Just take your medicine. Yeah. That's why, yes, that's the whole thing. Like for years, everybody has this story. And then they did it and their life's worse. Yeah. They went 10 years not knowing there was a problem. And then that magic COVID year came through in which both sides said whatever they wanted to say, and we realized that nobody knew anything. And it took a point where people now, especially that mothers have always been the nurse and the doctor inside of the family traditionally.
Right.
Like dads are fine, but our solution is, do you want me to cut it off? My finger hurts, let me stamp on your toe. Like that's always our thing.
I've said it so many times.
I'll just cut it off. No, never laugh. Like I got a sliver. Well, let me cut off your finger. No, it's but moms are really the ones that go get the stuff and put it together. Right. And so moms were looking for a way to legitimately take care of their family needs. And there are a lot of dads too, but the people that have found us are people who want options because they're smart enough to take information in, see if it fits for their family, utilize it in the way that works best, and they become more educated and smarter for where they want to go with their life. So I work really hard. Like it's really important for me to have a lot of if-thens or here's some information for you rather than like I don't say never and always.
Right.
I have a hard time saying this is going to be perfect for you because none of that works. But I have a lot more of, okay, Do you fit these things? Then you need to look at this stuff. And what I'm finding is people find if I give them respect, I find really good return. And it is a lot of the moms that do that, but I think it's because they're ready to find out what's wrong and they're tired of relying on somebody who's not really taking the time to take care of them.
Yeah, it's probably really empowering for them, right? That they are getting this knowledge for themselves.
Isn't that cool to empower somebody though?
Absolutely.
Like the best thing in the world is a parent to get your kid to a point where they don't need you.
Yeah.
It makes you sad and you think it was a mistake, but it's like the pinnacle of being happy about something. In the same way, if I have a patient who comes in and has a disease state that they've had for years and they feel completely powerless, if you say, okay, I need you to go read this, I want you to do this, and I want you to think about that. And they come back and even though they have the same disease, they're still sick. They come back and say, I think you're right. I found something. You see that spark in them of being empowered? That's all healthcare really can do.
Yeah.
Is empower someone to make their own decisions. Because in the long run, we're all going to die. I don't know if that broke the news to you. We're all rotting slowly. We're all hurting more. And the thing that scares us most is not knowing what's going to happen next. It's not actually what's happening.
Yeah.
So you help them to be in control. And it's like the coolest thing in the world to watch somebody get empowered, especially little moms.
Oh, yeah.
Brand new moms, when you're like, when you teach them, it's the best.
Yeah. And I think that word, I think uncertainty, right, of just not knowing is kind of powerlessness, right?
Absolutely. And not only that, then you feel bullied by whoever talks to you, even if they don't mean it.
Right. Right. And you're willing, when you talk about just take your medicine, right? You're just like, you might have a solution for this thing and you'll just do whatever they say, right? And it might be counterproductive even.
Or even might be productive, but as soon as you feel like somebody's bullying you and then it doesn't work, then the outcomes turns out terrible. So everybody has this story about this horrible doctor. Really what that doctor did wrong was didn't explain to you your options and didn't empower you before you made them. Because most of the things that doctors do is off evidence-based medicine, meaning if you fit in the middle of the curve, this is the most likely scenario. We're going to stay with the tried and true. But they don't explain to you that you might be an outlier.
Right.
And when this doesn't work, we have other things we can do. Instead, you feel like we failed, he failed, didn't talk to me. I was out that door and felt unloved, unwanted. And that's really the failure on most doctors is not what they're doing. It's the fact that they're afraid that their patients aren't smart enough to understand what's going on.
Right. When you talk about like the kind of the scope of human knowledge, right?
Right.
Average people think that doctors know everything, right? Some doctors think that they know everything.
A lot.
But of everything that we could know, I mean, how often do 20 years go by and we're like, oh, by the way, we were wrong all the time, right?
Well, the worst part is that something that you were sure was false comes around and becomes true. That's even worse than saying we thought this was true and now we find it's not. It's when we've been telling you for years this thing was false. Oh. And now we have to tell you that it's true. Yeah. Like that's a hard pill for the medical community in general to swallow. Like red light was one of those things. Like it was one of those, like that was really hard for them to swallow, the idea that low level infrared light actually could do something. Yeah. Because they made it voodoo for like 20 years.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. What are some of the benefits of red light?
I love red light because it talks about how we have alien DNA in us. Like it's actually my little thing. So mitochondria DNA looks different than every other DNA we have in our whole body. So it looks different. It acts different. It's actually a very old DNA that we get from when we barely were prokaryotic cells. And it just has transferred through the years. So way back in there's this is before the dinosaurs. I just want everybody to picture everything zipping back in time like in all those movies. And it's all swamp out there. And you got these little cells that have tails and they're flipping around. They would come up to the surface and get heated up by the infrared sun. And that would directly power their mitochondria. And then they'd zip down and they'd get some of their power that way. That same DNA is still found inside of us. Yeah. So when you have infrared light, it's like you're being able to supercharge that mitochondria with a little bit more. It's solar panels on the house, can't really run the whole house, but on a good day, you get to reduce some of the powers. But when you do that like on your hair follicle cells, or if you do that on the skin cells, if you do it around a wound, now you've just given it a +3 in power, which means everything that cell does can do simpler. Wow. But initially, everybody looked at it and said, we're not like that, it doesn't work. And then when the studies came out, it took monstrous amounts of studies for that to be adopted in. Right. And so the very first people talking about it got told, you can't say that, that's voodoo. Like even the FDA was after them. And now they've switched around, but of course, none of the people apologize. So it's one of those things where you really have to make sure you understand the science behind it, inform the patient, empower them to make their own choices, and say, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You have a warm knee. Like, that's the worst thing.
Yeah.
And instead of, I don't know, taking an injection and throwing it inside that knee, making an extra space because we have more evidence. Right. Well, I don't want that needle in my knee, you say. I'll try the warm light even if it does nothing. Yeah. So that's one of those things that's really tough because information shifts really fast. And really the idea of evidence-based medicine, the way that I learned it, because I'm old, doesn't work anymore. The information that comes out too fast. The idea of waiting for a huge meta-analysis over a 20-year period, you're already 3 treatments behind. Right. So we as individuals have to, and I'm not talking about healthcare, I'm talking about people at home have to learn how to decipher information, make their own decisions based off of their own things. And the only way you can do that is if you start to teach them and trust that people are smart. They just didn't study what you did. As soon as you teach them, they will be okay. And that's really what I think. I think people are smart.
Yeah.
I hate it when I hear people saying that patient populations are too dumb to understand it. I'm like, well, good luck. I'll throw 3 kids with you traveling over to Wyoming where they're all puking. Let's see how smart you are at that point.
Yeah.
Because, at that point, moms need to be educated that 1 dose of Dramamine will save your life on the 3rd puke because you don't want that 4th one coming out. And you only do 1.
Right.
But then I get, on that, I get a lot of blowback because they're like, well, if you use Dramamine regularly, I'm like, I didn't say any of those things. I'm teaching the mom. She can use the 1 dose to get her where she's going. And so I do get blowback. But to answer you, I think that there's a real problem if we don't educate the population. And that's really what my goal, what I really want to do.
Yeah. So in 2019, right, the pharmacy industry started struggling. And is that when you decided to make the shift into doing social media and bring, it was more just to bring awareness to the issue, wasn't it?
Breadwinners have a complex.
Yeah.
And who you are starts to become what you put in the bank account or how you take care of your family. You kind of lose yourself. And so you go through this crisis of, if I can't support my family and my life insurance policy is X, at what point is my life insurance policy more important than I am? You start going through a crisis.
Yeah.
So I put 20 years in, and I missed every baseball game. I would go home after work to go to the birthday parties. I ran as small as I could, as short as the staff. I fought against the Department of Licensing. I fought with the PBMs. I tried to keep prices down. I put my whole life in this. 2019 came. We were busier than ever, and I was losing money even though I was doing more prescriptions than ever. And I kind of hit this crisis mode of, what in the world have I done with my life?
Yeah.
And so I looked at it and said, well, if you keep doing what you're doing, it'll keep going the way it's going, right?
Yeah.
So do something different. And about that time, I had a neighbor, and he actually texted me yesterday, called me up and said, hey, do you want to do a social media post? And I had no social media at the time. And I said, sure, what are we going to do? And he said, well, I have this gym. We're going to do some videos, and you've hit the demographic. And I said, a really old dude that still can move. And he said, yeah, that's it. And I said, great, let's do it. And we shot the social media. And at the end, they're like, hey, you're really good at the camera. And I said, yeah, because I'm almost 50, and I don't care what anybody thinks. So it's easy to do what you want because I don't care.
Right.
Like, what am I going to be other than me? And so I started thinking about it. I said, why don't we go onto social media, see if we can get an extra, 1,000 people. And then I can come out and say that you don't have enough magnesium. In the store, we have a good sell on magnesium, and I could sell magnesium. Or I could say, before you take omeprazole for the rest of your life, you should probably ask, why am I taking omeprazole for the rest of my life? Come in and let's take a look and see where your acid content is, and let's get you a probiotic and see if you have something else, right? And then I hit that 1,000. And first, Jocelyn McClellan, which she always gets named first. She found me first and put me out there. And then Corinne Stoic is how she says it. Stoko. I always say her name wrong. Stoko found me next. And then it blew up to 10,000. And next thing you know, my wife's looking through the people who are following me, and she's like shocked of the people who are following me. I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. And since then, I've been riding the wave of where we're going with all of this. And it's helped because, 3 weeks ago, I finally went part-time in the pharmacy because I'm too busy doing this stuff.
Right.
But it also helped because I don't ever want to hit that point again, and I hope nobody's out there where they start feeling that they are no more than what's in their bank account or the size of their house. When I read my comments and there's one person who said, thank you, you helped me, then you have a value that you don't have to start putting a number against. And I don't want to go back there. I don't want anybody else to go back there. So good or bad, this is the train I'm on now. I mean, there's times where you start thinking pulling into the other line of traffic would be better than showing up to work. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? And it's way too common for way too many people, and you kind of hide it. And it's because you have to find the value inside you in a different way. And I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
And people think that because social media, like if I don't grow by X amount, and I don't say how much anymore because it's not really important. I used to like say, okay, what's wrong with me? Or why did that post not do well? But then I'll show up in Alaska and somebody will come over across the room to come over and say thank you. And I think how much courage it takes to go say thank you to someone. I would never do it. And I think to myself, well, you did do something good that day. And I don't want to go back to that. So people can hate on social media all they want, but I have done more good things on social media than I've done in my life before. And I don't want to go back to not being able to help people.
And yeah, social media can definitely be a two-edged sword, right?
Yeah, but you got to be careful with that. I had a guy call me up the other day. So your FYP, your For You page, right? If you're complaining to me what's on your For You page, you're telling me what's in your brain, man. You should not tell me what's on your FYP. Because they're like, I have all these nasty pictures on my FYP. And I'm thinking, I have cats and cakes, dude. So I can show you mine. I don't want to see yours. So you could look into your children's brain by opening up their FYP and see what they've been thinking about, what they're on. You can find out. So like I opened up one of my kids once and it was all about ADD, but he didn't want to say he had ADD. And it was a great way for me to say, okay, what's going on here?
Right.
But don't go around telling everybody what you're seeing on social media unless you're really ready, because it's telling me what you're looking at. And I'm not your bitch. I don't want to know none of that. So
as I was scrolling through your content, there's these themes that keep popping up, right?
Yeah.
ADHD is a theme that comes up a lot. Is that something that you're personally really interested in? Is it something that people ask you about a lot?
We're an ADD family. So my wife has ADD, but she has an ADD that looks different than my oldest boy. So my wife's got the pile stacking ADD where she's just can't finish focusing on one thing. So every place I go, there's like a pile that she started or a project she started and she can't finish it. And then you've got my oldest boy and he's got ADD so bad that he cannot like walk a straight line without getting bored. And then you've got a couple other kids that struggle a little bit with it. But I always come back to, we live in a world where ADD and ADHD is going to get worse, not better. So ADD and ADHD is an expression of not having enough of something. When we were growing up, our parents thought that if you made them dig enough post holes or work out in the yard, that the ADD would go away. But now we realize, something inside the brain, you could crack it open and grab it and say, hey, look, there's the ADD. What we realize now is it's not having enough of certain neurotransmitters. And we use more neurotransmitters now than ever before. So the idea that there's more people with ADD, well, your kids are looking at their phone while they're playing a video game, while they have a podcast going. I mean, that brain is being taxed to a point where we're expressing ADD in individuals that maybe in previous generations they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And our answer's always been really simple, which is give them more stimulants, which is not what people want. They want their kids, they want themselves to feel productive. And so it's not always about stimulants, but you look at Adderall. Adderall was given to the German army during World War II to do blitzkrieg.
Right.
This is the last major break in ADD treatment was World War II. Like we haven't got better since then. We have a few of them out there that start isolating some of the other ones, but we really haven't gone anywhere with it. So the idea that we have a modern society that's relying on such old technology and that we've looked at them all as underneath one type of ADD and that people are unhappy with it, that's a major problem. And that puts people in a position where they don't feel like they understand things. And so it's allowed a point where you can start explaining to people, if you're feeling this, then look for that. If you're feeling just focus, look at something else.
So I heard you say elsewhere once that your main goal with everything is to help make the world 1% kinder. What does that mean to you and what does that look like?
So I saw a lady in the mall about 2 months ago, and she said, I share all of your stuff with my daughters, but mostly just the things that are really nice. And I think to myself that in this world, we have a lot of pressures. Actually, drama and negative things all come out really heavily. But if you leave the world just a little bit nicer, everybody who remembers you, everybody thinks about you, they always have a little bit of warmth to them. And the goal is there. If I can make it 1% nicer, then my children live in a world where somebody's nice to them. And by doing that, you end up having a world that we all want to live in. And it's been one of those goals where, kindness is the only thing that I really think counts at the end of it. I don't think money, I don't think the rest of it matters. If you're kind, people know that you're kind, and they're going to be kind to you and those around you.
Yeah. That's a fantastic metric for life, is how we treat people.
Money won't count, but people remembering that you were kind, man, that screams volumes about who you were. Everybody's proud to know you when you've been kind.
Phil, it's been wonderful having you here. Where can people find you online? I know you have a podcast coming up.
It's called Take Your Medicine. We're just going to go through people's journeys and how they figured out how to own their own medical history. Phil's my pharmacist on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. And if you want, I'm around. You can just email me too if you want. So I'm always around for any of those. So if you have a second, come check it out. And if you have opinions, hey, give them to me. I can always learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.